Okay, so I've got my siphon hose sitting in my water still. I'm ready to mix up my primer. And if you were gonna do the top coat, it would be the exact same process. So I'll just demonstrate with primer. I'm going to you know what? Okay, so I've got some primer here left over from a job. We typically order in 5-gallon buckets because we use it so much. I'm gonna grab my, oh, shit. Is it still recording? Yeah, okay. I'm gonna grab my drill to mix. My paddle. Important to use a plastic paddle because metal can conduct sparks, and these paint vapors are flammable, not super flammable because they're water-based, but you know, they definitely are still combustible. So you want to make sure you're safe, don't create a spark, use plastic. So oh, yes, it is. It's just like a very long. Okay, sorry, brain fart. Okay, so there's just a little bit left in this one, but I'm gonna mix it up, and then I'm gonna strain it. I guess this is important to note that try to keep your drill on a low setting. This is water-based paint, so it has a tendency to bubble. So you want to reduce the bubbling as much as possible. So just keep it on a low setting. Mix your paint for a few minutes until you notice that all the color looks even. You're not seeing any streaks of pigment come through. There's only a tiny little bit left in this, so I'm not going to mix it for that long. Okay, I actually fast forwarded a little bit. Primer's all mixed. I'm actually going to strain it. So we've got these 5-gallon strainers here. I'm just gonna place that over the bucket. I always strain the primer. There's so many solids in it. So again, this is the primer. I'm just gonna strain it into an empty bucket. Or if you have a bucket of strained primer, then you can go ahead and just kind of add to that. It'll filter itself through. While that is straining itself, let me show you how you can alternately do it with 1 gallon. So if you're not working with a 5-gallon pail, we've got this little stand here. You can place a little strainer inside. We've got about enough strainers to last like 5 years. So just place a strainer inside. I like to keep buckets of strained primer just white. This is a cleaned out bucket. That's why it's right on the outside, but it's white. And then you can take your primer and kind of strain it into an empty bucket or strain it into, if you have other strained primers. But I always strain it just once. I don't double strain. I don't really feel the need to. That makes it through okay. If you're finding when you're painting that you're getting a lot of solids, or it's like it's clogging or having a hard time coming through, then you can always just stop and restrain it. But I find that just one strain with these strainers, which is 190 microns, that usually does the trick. See the straining. And we're just about done. And it is. I'm going to pause here because I'm going to go and rinse that. And I'll be right back. Okay, I rinsed out the strainer. I've got the primer mixed and strained. Now it's time to load up the lines with the primer. So you can either empty this tube, the fluid hose all the way first, and then stick it in here, or you can just stick it right in here. There's water in the lines, that's where we left it. So lots of water in here. I'm just gonna stick it right in my primer bucket. And then I'm simply going to load up the fluid hose with the primer. So I've got my spit bucket here still. So what I actually like to do is I like to just kind of run the gun in here. I put a lid on here typically for a splash guard. I typically put it on here for a splash guard because I don't like all the water and stuff in my face. So I'll just kind of watch the stream. Eventually it'll turn from water, which is pre-existing in the tubes, into primer or paint or whatever you have in here. And then once you see that it's kind of a full stream of primer, that's when you know that you've got your paint loaded up and then it's go time. Bring the camera closer without getting my computer wet. And actually watch it. Okay, yeah, let's try that. Try to watch it change from clear water to paint if you can see it. Okay, so it changed over from water to paint. Paint is fully in the lines now. You're ready to go. So, on the counter here for a second. Okay, so you got your tip, which is clean. You've got your gun, which is full of paint. You can tell that there's paint in there. I'm gonna go ahead and screw it on. Okay, it doesn't have to be super tight. These are all aluminum fittings in here, so you definitely don't want to over tighten it. Location of the spray nozzle. It doesn't really matter if the letters are right side up or upside down, as long as this part that's sticking out here is 90 degrees perpendicular to the gun, or I guess it's parallel to the floor. So you just want to make sure it's like this instead of like this. This will kind of give you a horizontal spray pattern, and you want a nice vertical spray pattern. So tighten it, make sure it's relatively perpendicular, and then we'll spray. Okay, so we've got our tip on our gun. Primer is in the lines. The last thing to do before you spray is to just turn on this atomizing air. You can hear it turn on there. The dial settings here. I will leave a little note. But typically we want to keep this, the one that's where the inlet air comes in, fluid pressure. We want to keep it between 40 and 60 PSI. And then this atomizing air side, the side that we just turned on, we want to keep this, I keep it like about 20, between 15 and 20. This basically just controls the size of your particles. So if you're finding that, you know, you're getting really big globs of paint and it's not really melting together well to form one even coating, you might want to just turn this up. If you turn the nozzle up, you know, and increase the atomizing air, it's going to create smaller particles. And then if you turn it down, it'll create bigger globs. If you turn it all the way off, it'll just be like one giant blob of paint. So this will just, you know, kind of atomize it. The more you atomize it, the smaller it is and the more misty it is. And then this, I mean, you can toy around with it, but I typically try not to touch these settings unless I need to. Keep this between 40 and 60. I keep it about 55. And then here I keep between 15 and 20, probably like 18. But I typically try not to touch that. I don't really need to. Next, setup. So let me go over that. Hang on. Setup is all based on personal preference. So we've got our pump behind us, whatever you're going to be spraying on in front of you, and then in front of that, you've got your exhaust fan that I only turn on when I'm spraying. That basically, exhausts to the outside. You'll find your rhythm. You'll figure out what setup you like. I typically like to spray on sawhorses and hay pyramids. I keep a slew of, blocks and these in case you want to, set up however you want to place your items on top of. I'll just keep these hay pyramids here for now. Be mindful though, they do leave an imprint, so I never like to use them on the face of the door or drawer because they will leave an imprint, even though you think that it's plastic. One hard way that little plastic can make a big mark. So let me get the piece that we're going to spray, just a little scrap. There's a scrap here. Typically, I like to prep things to 150 grit before we'll spray. It's not the prep of anything, so maybe I should prep it. Keep a little sanding pad nearby, typically, in case I need to sand something on a fly. Don't make it stop. Yes. So, when you're spraying, you need to keep your gun about 6 to 12 inches away from the piece that you're spraying. And also, it's important to keep it perpendicular at a 90-degree angle like this. The motion you're going to use is you're going to go back and forth. It's kind of like a rocky motion. You want to overlap your spray by 50%. So you want to spray, move your gun down a little bit, and then spray again. And you're going to overlap about halfway, just to make sure that you have full coverage. The other thing that we do after we spray one way is we go and we spray the other way. This is called a box coating, and it just makes sure that there's even coverage throughout. Really don't want to ruin my computer with paint, so I'll get the best I can. But I think I'm going to turn on this fan, put my respirator on, and then I'll spray. Yeah. I almost forgot. Before you spray, you want to test your fan pattern, your spray pattern, to make sure that the gun and the tip and everything is operating as it should be. After a while, you'll be able to just kind of spray and look at it and know if it's fanning out the way it's supposed to be. But until then, you should tap it with a piece of cardboard. Okay, so pull the trigger. This actually looks pretty good. It kind of looks like a loose football shape, which is what it should look like. Yeah, I do. Okay, so it kind of should either look like a hot dog, or it can loosely have kind of pointed ends. But if you get anything funky that's like kidney bean shaped, or maybe it's like dotted and then like that, which can't see any of that. So bring the computer over. Here we go. If you get anything that's funny shaped, this bad. This is bad. Anything that's not good. This is good. This is good. If you get anything that's not really this consistent pattern, this consistent fan, that's bad. And what that usually means is that your tip is clogged, or you have a clog somewhere in the line. I'll go over troubleshooting later. If you follow the correct like cleaning instructions and you keep the nozzle, the tip nice and wet, you really shouldn't have too much of an issue. But every problem has a solution, so I'll go over later how to fix anything. But if it's spraying weird and you test your pattern and there's anything that looks, you can look any sort of way. That's all bad. Okay, you want it to look like a hot dog or I don't know, something like this. Okay, now we're gonna spray. Okay, watch for the 50% overlap if you can see it. I'll do my box coat and I'll try to overlap 50%. Okay, so how to tell when you've got the right amount of coverage? So it will definitely be hard to tell in here, but you'll want kind of like a gentle orange peel. So it'll look a little ripply. It'll kind of look like water on a calm day, a little ripply. And then if you keep watching it, it will eventually flatten out and it'll kind of just like look like a glassy surface. But you definitely want a little bit of ripply, too much paint, and you'll get orange peel, which will mean it's way too ripply, and too little paint will be kind of, it'll look sparse. You'll be able to tell it's only been misted. We actually have something called a wet mill gauge to kind of gauge whether or not you're putting the correct amount of coating down. So this is a good idea to use if you're changing product or you're just starting out, but it's got all the lines here, milliliters. You start with the smallest. You're looking for 4 to 6 wet mils, which means that when the paint is wet and you put the wet mill gauge on it and slide it, that 4 to 6 number is covered. So this is 6 wet mils, which is on the heavier side, but I find that that's okay. I tend to spray on the heavier side, like 6 wet mils, and it tends to be okay. So after you've got your thing sprayed, this is primer, like I said, you're going to wait for it to dry. And then we'll go over scuffing and top coating later.